Hey there, resilient entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 3 of the VanLife Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Shalonda Makalo. Here we get real and raw about entrepreneurship, van life, and the hustle and resilience it takes to create a life on your own terms. In this episode, I'm trying something a bit different, more interactive, and I think you're going to like it. So if you're ready, let's get to it.
Hi Shalonda, thank you for allowing me to interview you for this episode. In the last episode, you opened up about your failed business ventures and how you clawed your way into Plan C, but this is something else entirely. You didn't just move out of your apartment, you detonated your entire life. You left Minnesota in the dead of winter, with a blizzard barreling down, and you chose the front seat of a Honda Accord over the safety of 4 walls. Let's get real here. You had an apartment, you had steady clients in your chair as a stylist. You had income, a roof, heat, and then, snap, you walked away from all of it. To most people listening right now, that doesn't sound brave, it sounds insane. So break it down for me, and for everyone who's asking the same question, was life really that unbearable? Or were you just running? Because when you trade stability for the storm, people are left wondering, what on earth pushed you that far?
You know what? I get it. It does sound crazy. I mean, I lived it. And even I can look back and think, what the hell was I doing? But here's the truth. I was absolutely miserable. Not just unhappy. Not just stuck. I'm talking suffocating misery in Minnesota. Miserable in my apartment. Miserable in my career. Miserable in my so called life. Every single day felt like I was dragging myself through quicksand. I woke up with a knot in my stomach and went to bed with the same knot still there. It was utter disdain for everything around me. And then one morning, this is what lit the fire under me. I heard on the news that a blizzard was coming, and instantly I panicked. But it wasn't the snow, it wasn't the storm. It was the realization that if I stayed in Minnesota, I was going to drown in that misery and never escape. That blizzard became a crack in the wall, a moment where I thought, this is it. This is my chance to get out once and for all. So I moved fast. First thing I did was grab my lease, baby, and I read through it like a speed reader, desperate to see if I had a way out. I was 9 months into my 12-month lease, but then I saw it. I could sublet. That was my ticket. I didn't even hesitate. I set the whole process in motion. Next, I went straight to the salon owner where I was working and told him I was done. I was leaving by the end of the week. Then came the hardest part, telling my clients, people I had built trust with. My books were filled a month and a half out. These people had depended on me, and yet I still walked away. Then came the purge. I sold things, I gave things away, I donated what was left. I stripped my apartment down to nothing. And I have to tell you, for me, it wasn't just moving out. It was the ultimate act of bravery. Because in that moment, I wasn't just walking away from furniture or a lease or clients. I was saving my own life. And that's something I've been doing since I was 9 years old when my mom uprooted me out of nowhere and moved me to Minnesota against my will. That state held every trauma, every scar, every nightmare I've ever had to heal myself from. For every little high Minnesota gave me, baby, it delivered 3 soul-crushing lows. So once someone got approved to take over my lease, that was it. Done. No turning back. I packed up my little Honda Accord And with nothing but adrenaline and desperation, I drove 30 hours straight through from Minnesota to Arizona. Now, let me be clear. When I left, my plan was not to move into my car. That wasn't even on my radar. When I got to Arizona, I thought I'd just figure it out. And I did. I mean, it took me about 6 months. And then I rented a room in someone else's house for 6 months, an additional 6 months. But then 1 month before my lease ended, I stumbled onto YouTube videos about people living in their cars. It was called car dwelling at the time. And something in me sparked. So, 3 years earlier, I had been fascinated with tiny homes, and more specifically, the mobile tiny homes and the freedom of mobility with such a tiny space. The idea of stripping life down to its bare essentials. So, when the lease was up in this room where I rented, I didn't go look for another one. I didn't shop for a house. That definitely was not a part of the plan. I moved straight into my little Honda Accord. I renamed him Hotel Honda, and that was it. That was the beginning of a brand new chapter. And let me tell you, it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even easy, but I loved it and I fell in love with it. It was the freest I had felt in my entire life.
But hold on, let's be real here. You just walked away from your apartment, your clients, your income. You didn't feel guilty? You didn't feel like you owed anyone an explanation? What about your kids? What did they think? Because from the outside looking in, it sounds like you just said, forget all of you. I'm choosing me. Goodbye. Is that what it was?
Doing what is necessary is never easy. It's never done without some level of raw emotion. But guilt? No, I didn't feel guilt. What I felt was something deeper, something heavier. I had lived in Minnesota for decades, and every fiber of my being was screaming at me that I couldn't survive there any longer. And to be honest with you, no, I didn't feel that I owed anyone an explanation, a heads up, or a sit down conversation before I made the decision to save myself. As for my kids, let's talk about that because people love to throw that question at me. My daughter was 24 and my son 23. They weren't little kids that I was abandoning. They were grown, living their own lives, and truthfully, they were already working through their own frustrations with me. My son hadn't spoke to me, but I did call my daughter. I felt she at least deserved to know that I was leaving the state where she and her brother were born, and I knew she would tell my son. Beyond that, I didn't feel I owed anyone else an explanation. The man I was dating at the time, I told him I was leaving. What I didn't tell him, because I didn't even know it myself yet, was that I'd end up living in my car. So when I finally did settle into that life and told him, his reaction, as expected, was what happened to the Shalonda I knew? What's going on with you? Where is this coming from? And I told him flat out, she's gone. That version of me died in Minnesota. This is the new me. And I was determined that the second half of my life would not mirror the misery of the first half. One of my closest girlfriends from cosmetology school, she was furious when I left because I was her hairstylist and she kept regular appointments with me. When we finally talked, she admitted that she was mad at me. And you know what? I respected that. But after she listened to me and why I left, she told me she understood. And that actually mattered to me. It showed me that real love, real friendship doesn't come with shackles. So, no, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel obligated. And I don't live my life according to anyone else's expectations. The people who truly love me may not understand in the moment, But eventually they did. And those who didn't, well, they simply don't matter. At the end of the day, this wasn't about betrayal. This was about survival. And I chose me. Each and every time, I will always choose me.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You leave Minnesota in this blaze of defiance, no guilt, no apologies, no looking back, and you drive 30 hours straight into Arizona. But what then? I mean, you didn't have an apartment waiting for you. You didn't have a job lined up. You didn't even have a plan. You're 42 years old, fresh out of everything you've ever known, and you're sitting in Arizona with nothing but a Honda Accord full of your belongings. What was that first night really like? Was it liberating? Terrifying? Did you ever stop and think, oh my god, what did I just do?
You know what? To keep it all the way 1000, it was all three. It was terrifying, it was liberating, and yeah, once the adrenaline of uprooting my entire life wore off, reality hit me like a freight train. There was a moment where I sat there staring at the stunning Arizona sky, thinking, what the hell did I just do? The first 10 days, I stayed with a childhood friend, him and his husband. And just like that, they asked me to leave. 10 days in a new state, no plan, no roots, and suddenly, no roof again. But I've learned something about myself over the years. God always sends someone. Always. I had met someone shortly after I moved to Arizona. I now call him my angel friend, an older gentleman who let me stay with him when I had nowhere else to go. And let me tell you something, friends, the timing of everything was divine. Listen, I left Minnesota on November 28th, 2016 at around 11:30 p.m. I drove 30 hours straight through the snow, through my tears, through everything that tried to hold me back. And I pulled into Arizona on December 1st at exactly 4 a.m. At first, I did what was familiar. I put down a deposit on a salon suite at Phoenix Salon Suites. I was excited. I told myself, you can rebuild here. You can pick up where you left off. But the moment I did that, it was like my soul screamed, no! I was about to recreate the same exact life I had just escaped from. The same cycle of overworking, overgiving, and underliving. And I remember one night just breaking down because I realized I didn't move across the country just to live the same life in a different zip code. I was done being the stylist behind the chair. I wanted to be the woman behind the vision. So I started experimenting. I was hustling creatively, trying to figure out how to generate income without giving my entire self away. And then, just 7 days after I arrived in Arizona, on December 7th, 2016, I went to a free entrepreneur seminar hosted by Damon John, the founder of Fubu. And that night, something clicked. That was the spark. That was the moment I realized that I didn't just want to work for myself, I wanted to build something of my own. The next few months were messy. I was trying, failing, pivoting, meeting people, losing others. But in the middle of it all, I was coming alive. That Arizona sun just did something to me. I'd been frozen for so long in Minnesota, literally and emotionally. Arizona melted that off me. It wasn't until about 10 months later that I actually moved into my Honda Accord, Hotel Honda. It wasn't the plan, but it became the perfect setup for my next chapter. Because without the weight of rent, I could finally breathe, finally think, finally filled. And for the first time in my life, living in that car felt like freedom. It was small, yeah. It was simple, for sure. But it was mine. And for a woman who's never had a safety net, that little Honda became exactly that, my safety net on wheels.
Wow. Hearing you talk about that, it's almost like you weren't just searching for a new place, you were searching for yourself. I think a lot of people would have crumbled after that first setback in Arizona, after losing housing twice, after realizing you might have to live in your car. But you didn't crumble. You said something that really struck me. That living in your Honda actually gave you a sense of safety. That's not something most people could ever imagine. Can you take us inside that moment, when it finally hit you that this wasn't temporary anymore? That Hotel Honda wasn't just a stopgap but the start of a whole new chapter? What did that feel like, honestly? Was it peace, panic, or maybe a strange mix of both?
As strange as it may sound, it was peace. Not fear, not panic, definitely not regret. Just this unexplainable peacefulness that I had never felt before. The first apartment I lived in after my divorce, I was terrified. I mean, I'd lock the doors, I'd sleep with my bedroom door closed just because it made me feel a little more safe. But that first night in Hotel Honda, windows uncovered, no blinds, just simple door locks, parked in the middle of a strip mall, I felt safe. And I know how that sounds. A four-door Honda Accord, back seat full of clothes, front seat piled with everything I owned, along with the trunk, but somehow it felt right. It felt like the first breath of my own life. That's crazy. I started purging though, getting rid of more and more so I could actually move around in that tiny space. I can't lie, I slept good, better than I had in any apartment. I can't explain that kind of peace. You just know it when it finds you. The hardest part wasn't the sleeping, it was the downsizing, emptying the trunk, cleaning out the back seat, figuring out where I fit. Literally, I'm 5'6", so I couldn't stretch across the back seat. Then one night I realized my front seat reclines almost flat. Game changer. Once I moved up front, oh, it was a wrap. I was comfortable. I slept like a teenager. You hear me? Eventually, I tinted my windows myself because I couldn't afford to have it professionally done. The Arizona heat will force you to be resourceful. And thankfully, because it is so hot and the sun will scorch you, they do allow you to have limousine tint. Covering my windows made my little space cozy, livable, and I was documenting the whole thing on my YouTube, sharing my story in real time. People were fascinated. And me, I was free. No rent, no leases, no wait, just me figuring it out day by day. And honestly, I love that feeling. But in true Shalonda fashion, the peace didn't last long. In 2018, I got sick. I was staying with a girlfriend who needed help with her two daughters, and while I was with her, Hotel Honda was stolen out of the parking lot of her apartment building. Just like that, everything I had built and everything I owned inside that little car was gone. I had been in Hotel Honda for just about a year, and suddenly I was back to square one. No car, no home, and having to start the cycle all over again.
Wow, I don't even know what to say. You finally found peace. Maybe for the first time in your life, and then just like that, it's gone. Stolen. Can you take us into that moment? Like, what did that feel like when you realized Hotel Honda was gone? And maybe even more than that, after everything you'd already walked away from, how did you even begin to find the strength to start over again?
You know, I'm so detached from material possessions that when Hotel Honda was stolen, everyone around me was more upset than I was. People were pacing and panicking, telling me, "You have to call the police. Girl, just call the police. Don't you want to find out what happened to your car?" And I just stood there, calm, almost eerily calm. My immediate response was, clearly, whoever took it needed it more than I did. And I meant that. I wasn't being noble. I was just honest because I've never been attached to things. They don't anchor me, they don't define me. They come, they go, and I keep moving. That's always been my rhythm. But I'll tell you what did sting: losing my transportation. Not the clothes, not the stuff, not Hotel Honda as my home, because honestly, I wasn't living in it at the time. That car was how I got around. It was how I dropped my girlfriend's daughters off at school and picked them up. It was how I helped pick up groceries. It was how I moved. And suddenly, that was gone. Still, even then, I refused to sit in bitterness because I've always believed that everything happens for me, not to me. Every single storm has a silver lining. My only job is to search through the wreckage until I find it. Now, don't get me wrong, I had moments of frustration. 2 weeks before it was stolen, someone had broken into it and just ransacked everything. That, that right there pissed me off. So when my friend came running in 2 weeks later saying, "Your car is gone," I just took a deep breath and said, "Well, it's already gone now." What was I going to do? Fight the wind? It was a 1998 Honda Accord. I didn't have insurance on it. No sense in crying over metal. That's also why I did not lock my doors, because I figured if someone's going to attempt to steal it, at least they won't have to break the windows. At that time, keep in mind, I was sick, really sick. So my energy was precious. And I wasn't about to waste it chasing something that was no longer mine. Eventually, the police did find it, abandoned, and the man who took it. I didn't pursue charges. I didn't even ask questions. In fact, the only reason I reported it stolen is because people kept nagging me about it. And by then, I was already fighting for something much bigger: my health. And the entire next year was a battle. 2018 into early 2019 was survival season for me. I was healing, body, mind, and spirit. And in that quiet, something powerful started to form. I moved into a women's transitional housing, and that's where I started writing. That's where the first seeds of the Franklin tree were planted. Back then, it didn't have a name. It was just this fire on the inside of me saying, create what you needed, build the place you never had. By that summer, my body was stronger, my vision was clearer, and my faith was unshakable. I stayed with a couple of beautiful black women for a few months after leaving the transitional housing center, And then, just like Minnesota, just like again here in Arizona, I felt that pull again. On October 30th, 2019, I looked around and said, it's time. I have to be in California now. And less than 24 hours later, I was on a Flixbus headed west, a one-way ticket. I left at 1 a.m. and arrived in downtown Los Angeles at 9:36 in the morning on Halloween Day, 2019. And just like that, another chapter began.
You know, it's wild hearing you bring up that moment, because I remember in episode 2, you talked about that turning point. When you started your cleaning business while staying with Craig, the older gentleman who just had hip surgery. That's when things really started shifting for you. And if I remember correctly, that's also when Hotel Honda was gone, right? You were literally starting from scratch again, but you built that cleaning business fast, saved up, and bought your second vehicle, the Mercedes Mansion. So I want to sit with that for a second, because that's such a powerful full circle moment. You went from living in a car to owning an SUV, and not just any SUV, but something you could really make into a home. Talk to me about that. What was that upgrade like, going from a small car to a larger vehicle? Did you convert it? Did it feel like freedom on a new level? And emotionally, what did that moment represent for you? Buying that second home on wheels after everything you'd been through?
Buying the Mercedes Mansion, that was a different kind of high. It wasn't just about getting a bigger vehicle. It was the symbol of everything I had been working toward. I mean, come on. It was a Mercedes. I was proud. I was excited. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something again with my own two hands. I was doing well with my cleaning business, like I mentioned in episode 2. And less than a month after buying it, I converted that SUV into my next home. I took out every seat, even the passenger seat. And that's where I built my little pantry kitchen area. My bed was tucked right behind the driver's seat. And I had this faux leather bench that held all of my clothes. And because I love beauty, even in the hardest seasons, I made it me. The walls were covered in white faux fur. They were my window coverings. They still needed to be beautiful. On the back side of the white faux fur, I put gray flannel so that it looked dark from the street, but soft and cozy on the inside. I even had live plants sitting on the counter, my pantry area, and that's where my passenger seat used to be. To me, it was everything. My tiny furry queendom. Now, I did pay someone to help me with the conversion, someone who turned out to be a drug addict. And yes, I wasted some money and some wood. But hey, you do what you got to do. I was determined to have my space, my freedom, and my peace. And that's what the Mercedes Mansion gave me. It gave me freedom on a whole new level. I lived in it for 2 full years. The last year, though, it was no longer my transportation. It was just my home because it started leaking oil from everywhere. I mean, absolutely every corner where oil circulated through, it was leaking from. But even then, I loved my home. By 2023, I was down to just one client, the first clients I'd ever had, who had become my friends. For 7 months, I walked everywhere, everywhere. And in that time, I learned a different kind of patience, a different kind of faith, because I was no longer able to keep up my normal routine. I was no longer able to keep up going to the gym and having regular showers. I was no longer able to keep up buying my hygiene products, my toiletries on a regular schedule. I was no longer able to do my laundry on a regular schedule. because I was out of transportation. So it caused my faith to be tested. But thankfully, that is one thing that has passed every single test over the years. My faith is unshakable and unwavering. And once again, divine timing. I'll never forget it. The day my friends told me they wanted to help me get the mansion fixed, it was the same day the police showed up. There was one officer who had seen me around, and I think he just liked me. Not in a weird way, just human to human. He said, I knew this was your vehicle and I didn't want to be the one to tow it, but you've got to move it today. And I told him it'll be gone today. My friends just told me they're helping me to get it fixed and to call a tow truck right now. And he smiled. It was like grace showed up right on schedule. But when we took it to the mechanic, he told my friends the truth. He could fix it, but it wouldn't last. He said, if you really want to help Shalonda, get her something new. And they did. They actually did. They found my next home, the one I live in right now, my 2004 Dodge Caravan SXT. I call him Le Chateau, which means the castle in French. And baby, let me tell you, it's bigger than the mansion, and it's definitely bigger than Hotel Honda. Another upgrade, another chapter, another miracle.
Wow, what a journey, Shalonda. From Hotel Honda to the Mercedes Mansion, and now to Le Chateau. It feels like each chapter just keeps expanding in both space and purpose. Now, I know from episode 2 that this is also when you started to rebuild your businesses, host mode events, and the Nurturing Young Entrepreneurs program. And it almost feels symbolic, right? Like your environment and your vision have both grown. So tell me, what has it been like living in Le Chateau while building out those businesses? Do you feel a different kind of stability now? A sense that all those years of stripping away and rebuilding have positioned you to create from a more grounded, purposeful place?
I feel like I'm in a completely new chapter of life. Like I'm finally standing on solid ground, even though my ground happens to have wheels. Le Chateau really represents a new birth for me. It's the first time in all my years of mobile dwelling that I've had a home that's both reliable and fully converted. A home that I can exhale in. When I came out of federal custody after 7 months and 8 days, just knowing I had my home waiting for me, that alone gave me peace. I didn't have to worry about rent or eviction or scrambling to find a roof over my head. My van was safe, my plants were alive, and my friends, who were also my very first clients, had kept it safe for me the entire time. Those same friends are now my first host mode events clients. Now that's a full circle moment. And now, with our very first host mode events happening October 11th, I can barely describe how excited I am. It's like everything I've been building toward, every risk, every night in Hotel Honda, every setback, and every restart. It's all coming together. For the first time, I have both stability and momentum. My plants are thriving, my spirit is thriving, and my business feels real, like something I can actually develop and grow long term. And I'm cherishing that. It feels like the honeymoon phase of life again. That sweet moment when everything feels new and full of promise. So, yes, this chapter with Le Chateau is special. It's peace, it's purpose. It's proof that no matter how unconventional your path looks, when you stay faithful stay creative, and keep moving forward, life will meet you right where you are.
Shalonda, I have to say, listening to your journey, from walking away from everything, to Hotel Honda, to the Mercedes mansion, and now Le Chateau, it's hard not to feel moved by how you've turned every setback into a stepping stone. You've shown such resilience and faith through it all. Before we close, I want to ask you this. If there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from your story today, one truth that's carried you through all of this, what would that be?
You know, I think the biggest thing I want people to take away is that you don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. You just have to move. You have to take action. When I left Minnesota, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an apartment waiting. I didn't even have a clue of how it was all going to work out. But I knew I couldn't stay where I was. And sometimes that's all faith really is. It's motion. It's believing that if you just take the next step, the path will appear. And I've learned that peace doesn't come from stability on paper. It comes from obedience, from listening when your spirit says, go. Every car I've lived in, every city I've started over in, every time I've lost something, it's all led me right here. So, if anyone listening is standing at that edge, afraid to leap, take it from me. Jump. Trust your wings. It might look scary and it might not make sense, but that leap could be the very thing that frees you. Thank you so much for listening to the Van Life Hustle podcast with me, your host, Shalonda Makalo. If you got value from today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a drop. New episodes come out every Wednesday. And if you know another resilient entrepreneur who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Let's grow this community together. Until next time, keep hustling, keep creating, and keep building a life on your own terms. I'll see you in the next one.